What's up, guys? So in this video, I'm going to be going over Lam Research. They just came out with their earnings report, and I'm going to try to go over exactly what I thought were the major points, what the CEO had to say about the earnings, and kind of what this means, at least for me anyways, of the whole semiconductor space as a whole, and really what that can kind of tell us, going forward in the next couple of quarters. If you guys are new to my channel, my name is Dan, and this is Millennial Investing. I just go over tech-related topics, stock topics, and I, track my portfolio and kind of share my insights to what's going on in the markets and, give my 2 cents on everything that's going on and how I see things. If you guys, if you haven't subscribed, make sure to subscribe. And if you like this video, make sure to like it. And so without further ado, let's just kind of jump into it. So Lam came in and kind of surprised almost everybody. The majority of analysts were kind of shocked with what happened, and Lam spiked at the beginning of the day today. It kind of dissipated off. It's still closing up, I believe, over like 1% or so. But overall, pretty good quarter, pretty strong quarter for something that everybody thought was going to be kind of the beginning of a bloodbath. LRCX has been just getting punished as of late. Once the whole semiconductor space started to go down, all of the manufacturers started to get pummeled, from the brunt of it, because, as the cycle starts to change, these companies are the ones that are going to get suffered the most. But thankfully, they beat earnings. Their actual came out at about 14 cents above what they were expected to do, and their revenue beat by 20 million. However, that does show a minus almost 6% year over year. So it does show that earnings are slowing, but they're not slowing nearly as fast as what analysts were anticipating. If you were following the company over the past couple of earnings, they did say that they thought that the slowdown was just about over, and they thought that the majority of the deceleration had already been kind of factored in. But again, who knows? Those are all just leading estimates at the time. So if you know who Lam is, like Lam Research, pretty much, they create manufacturing equipment for semiconductors used in fabs. They go over integrated circuits, and they mainly focus on the front end wafer development of those circuits. So companies that will use, say, their processes and their manufacturing would be like, Samsung, Micron, companies that, they're making other semiconductors, primarily in memory, for example. And so they just supply all that hardware and all the, the manufacturing processes for those companies in order to get to, say, the end DRAM module. Just quick look at their financials. So you got the PE ratio right now is sitting at about 8.5. Price to book is, 3.6. Dividend yield right now is paying a nice 3%, 3% yield. And debt to equity is at a nice low level of 0.38. So overall, the company is healthy, and the fundamentals, something that the CEO goes into over and over again in their, their interview, that the fundamentals of the company, regardless of what's going on in the, the sector and, what people think about the whole cycle going on, the company itself is financially stable, which is something very important, especially, being in the tech sector and, anything can happen tomorrow. So CEO had a couple of words to say. He mainly talked about, on a broad spectrum, he thought that, society is moving towards data. The need for, semiconductors, the need for fabs are only going to be going up as we start to, get more and more in depth with technology. And, he felt very strong about, the next, say, 10 years on the matter. He did point out that the first half of 2019, he expects to be significantly stronger than the second half of 2018. I'm going to kind of get into the why I think that happened in a bit, but that's something to keep in mind. DRAM prices have been continuing to go lower, so he definitely thinks that's going to play a part, for companies like Samsung and Micron. But that being said, it's only, as the technology gets better and as more companies put money into this, obviously they're going to be able to start producing these modules at a lower price, which will drive down overall costs, which will, allow them to sell them at a cheaper price. So that's only to be expected. It would only go up in the sense that, say, demand was still extremely scarce as it was a couple of years ago. So that's to be expected. And I think a lot of people are more freaked out about DRAM prices going down for all of these companies together, and I just do not fully understand why. If anything, you should be happy that you can capitalize more of the market. But anyways, He thought that major drivers for the whole industry moving forward, especially for semis and just silicon in general, is going to be cloud infrastructure being built out. 5G will be a huge boom because it's going to pretty much intensify all of the communication between everything. And then automation is going to continue to grow, and autonomous vehicles are going to continue to be an industry that people are going to be seeking after for years to come. And the biggest point that you kind of want to take all of this with, the caveat to the end of it, is that he did mention about how DRAM manufacturers, with the exception of Micron, have been easing up, on their capex, and he kind of says that it's relatively constant with the trends that he's seen over the past couple of years, and that's that most of these manufacturers are very careful with how much money they dump into their capex, assuming that they do not have a super clear light and a very easy, follow-through method as to why they're going to need all the, the equipment that they're going to be buying. So that can kind of, that kind of freaks out a lot of investors currently, because they're like, okay, maybe these, companies aren't feeling as good about the future. According to the CEO, he thinks that their, anticipation is relatively aligned with the way it's been. It just happens to be that everybody's kind of looking at it now under a more magnifying glass, and people might just be pulling at things that don't need to be looked into, possibly. Obviously, if you're looking at it, if you're a company and you're lowering your capex expenditure, like if you're Samsung in the situation, obviously Samsung is thinking that either it's going to be able to produce enough DRAM or the DRAM demand is going to be lower, and otherwise it would be dumping more money into it, unless, say, they wanted to switch more capital expenditure to a different industry. But for right now, I would definitely keep that in mind, that all of the major DRAM competitors, except for Micron, are cutting back on their capex. So definitely keep that in mind. And so my thoughts, after kind of going through, I went through the earnings call relatively quickly. I need to go through it again because it didn't make. I was reading a transcript of it, and a couple of, I don't know if it was the transcriber or what, but it didn't seem. Not all the sentences seemed to make much sense. So I definitely need to look into that again. But so anyways, just kind of giving it a quick overview though. Looking at the whole semiconductor space, I kind of see one major trend, and the reason why I look at it in this way is because I essentially sum up the entire semi industry as one giant computer. And I'll explain right now what that is. So the entire semiconductor industry started to slow down about a year ago, and that was mainly brought on because of the cybersecurity, threats that had to do with Intel's processors. Now, so when Intel's processors started to come in, or that issue started to come in, people immediately started to halt on the buying of new technology, because everybody was afraid of okay, how widespread is this? What's going on? And it kind of gave everybody that was buying CPUs in bulk, whether it be for servers or for products, it kind of made them step back and be like, okay, what's going on? Is this going to be a bigger issue? Is this contained? What is this? And then that kind of unraveled, and it was every single Intel processor up until that point. And obviously Intel couldn't continue to sell in bulk processors that had major security issues. So they, Intel, Microsoft, and Google all kind of partnered together to try to come up with solutions of it. But it did cause an overall slowdown. That benefited AMD very well. AMD was able to capitalize on that extremely well. However, now you've hit a point where AMD is, selling to its capacity. And because, you got to think that AMD to Intel, AMD is not the size of Intel, so AMD does not have the supply chain that Intel has. So you're in a situation where, okay, companies that were ready to switch right away, yeah, they bought from AMD, but some of them either, one, couldn't get as many CPUs as they wanted, or two, they were still waiting on Intel to, pretty much fix their mistake, and, with Intel extending their, estimates and their deadlines for when they thought that was going to get done, a lot of companies were just kind of sitting there twiddling their thumbs, waiting on the CPU space to kind of start picking up again. And so that led to a lot of people not needing to upgrade their servers. So that means that people weren't switching from, say, a DDR3-based server over to DDR4 server. So that means that companies aren't needing to dump more money into, say, DRAM. So Micron went over that in their last earnings report, that because of the CPU slowdown, a lot of servers no longer, obviously needed their DRAM shipments. They said that they didn't cancel them and they moved them into the later half of 2019. And that kind of goes directly in with what Lam Research was saying, that the first half is going to be extremely slow. And that is all pretty much waiting on either AMD or Intel to pick up the pace as far as supplying all these servers, the biggest growth industry for all semiconductors right now, with their CPUs, because if they don't get the CPUs, then you can't build the server, and if you don't build the server, you have a slowdown of GPUs and memory modules. So, like building a computer, you kind of have to have your CPU and then your GPU in place before you can have all the extra bells and whistles. Assuming that this will only continue, the markets seem to have really been taking down the semiconductor space as of recently. Now, when it comes to the manufacturers and the DRAM manufacturers, I definitely don't know if I don't think the worst case scenario is going to happen, but that's what's getting priced in right now. People are slowly pricing in that things are going to continue to get worse before they get better, which could very well happen. However, with the the rate at which AMD and Intel are trying to seize this opportunity right now for Intel's mistakes, I don't know if it's going to be the end all of all things, for the amount of time that it's going to take for these two companies to start pumping out CPUs again and start really revamping the space and allow upgrading technology to kind of go back to the way it was. So I do think that the market right now is extremely pessimistic because of that, but I wouldn't say that there's no chance for the CPU manufacturers to really kind of rebound from this. Now, that being said, no one is going to really know which way the market's going to be going in until pretty much the second half of 2019. That's when Intel is supposed to be coming out with their rebranded new line that isn't just their rebranded 8th gen. So it's going to be really interesting. I made a video on going over Intel's most recent line that was just the rebranded 8th gen, and didn't really surprise people. People were actually pretty upset, with all the fake benchmarks going around, all those scandals. So Intel's definitely not in the greatest light, and I don't think those CPUs are going to sell out that great. It'll be interesting to see how those sales go. And also, going off of that, Nvidia's sales, I'm also relatively bearish on in the short term. I know I did talk about how in the portfolio I did add Nvidia because it did have a major sell-off with the last tech correction. However, due to Nvidia's GPUs, they're priced to a premium, and the difference as far as the end consumer goes is not that substantial. It's about doubling the cost of the new GPU series for only about a 30% performance boost. From the 10K series to the 20K series, or 1000 series to the 2000 series, and I honestly don't think the end consumers, like mainly gamers and developers, I don't think those people are going to be super, rushing to the store to really buy out all of these cards. Mainly because the the ray tracing technology that was introduced is great, but with every major rev up in tech, generally it has about a year to work out all the kinks, and the next year is going to come out and just be a powerhouse in comparison. So I think that that's what's going to happen, and I think that next wave of GPUs is going to sell out much better than this current wave. But that could possibly give you an opportunity to kind of buy in weakness. And why that matters. So I know I kind of went on a little tangent there with Nvidia, and you might be confused with why I'm talking about all these semiconductor companies, even if they're not, say, buyers of, Lam Research is manufacturing. Mainly because if any part of, say, the semiconductor ecosystem falters, everything else gets slowed because of it. And it's because, again, relating to this as if it's a computer. If you're upgrading your computer, or say if you're installing new computers for the server space, you can't go ahead and do all of that until all of the pieces are together. And generally companies don't want to, say, buy all their graphics cards, then buy all their RAM, and then wait for their processors to kind of be available. They're going to wait to do all that at once. So it's definitely going to be a boom together and bust together type of thing for the semiconductor space. Another thing to keep in mind is that Nvidia's GPUs, their GDDR6, is made from Micron's RAM modules. So depending on how much Nvidia sells, is going to directly relate the balance sheet of Micron. Because obviously if Nvidia continues to sell out, they're going to continue to make more cards and they're going to continue to buy from Micron. But if that isn't the case, which is my personal fear for this particular line, that could be, you know, not only revenue slow down from Nvidia, but especially revenue slow down for Micron, which will then, you know, lead to Lam getting less revenue and so on and so forth. So just my ramble of the semiconductor space. You know, I hope you guys got some use out of that, and you can kind of just see, you know, what I'm looking at when I'm looking at the whole semiconductor space. And, you know, let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace.